Hi, this is Jurgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis vlog. Let's talk about guilt, how to deal with guilt, and how to help people who struggle with guilt and people who are stuck, deeply stuck with guilty feelings. First of all, it's important to realize that your feelings are your thinking barometer. So, a nice analogy for this is imagine that you had orange virtual reality goggles and you went outside during the daylight. It would look as if your lawn was orange. It would look as if the sky was orange and that your neighbor was orange. And you might be tempted to try to find some paint to try to fix the orange world that you live in. But that perception doesn't really tell you that you're living in an orange world. It tells you that you're viewing the world through orange virtual reality goggles. It tells you about your goggles. So, in the same way, if you have guilty feelings, it tells you that you have guilty virtual reality goggles. It's a thinking barometer. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything about what you're thinking about, but it completely tells you about the goggles or the thought construct that you're viewing the world through. So if you're having guilty feelings, at least you can know that that tells me that right now I'm viewing my relationships or my past or some particular thing going on in my life through um, a guilty lens. And the intensity of your feelings then will tell you how compelling that particular lens looks to you. Now, there seems to be three types of guilt, meaning three typical ways of conceptualizing guilt depending upon one's psychological development. So, for example, some people, when they say that they feel guilty, if you drill down on it a little bit and you ask them, how are you guilty or what's going on for you, you realize that they're not really feeling guilt. They're feeling more a type of worry. It's more like I'm guilty because he or she has discovered, I feel guilty because he or she has discovered what I've done. And it's more a concern of what he or she or they will do to me. What will the consequences be to me as a result of me being found out, for example? Some people call this guilt. It's more a form of worry. Other people, when they experience guilt, it's due to having internalized a particular uh, teaching or societal standard or cultural norm, and having the perception that you're not behaving or living in accordance with that norm. So it's more like a socialized guilt, right? I'm not being a good Christian as defined by the church, or I'm not being a good um, father as defined by the cultural norms that I have internalized. So this is a more socialized type of guilt. And then you might speak to others again who the guilt is more a signal that they're failing to live up to their own standards and values for how they think they should be. So in my behavior, I've fallen short of my own kind of self-defined standards. So guilt is essentially just a signal then that says that you are failing to live in accordance with a particular value or standard that you have either internalized or held. So let's say that you have, for example, a value of being honest, and a good friend, tells you, don't, I'm going to tell you something, keep this secret, and you fall for the temptation of telling the story to someone else. You might not you may now feel guilty because you haven't lived up to the standard of being honest, right? So if you or a client you work with is experiencing guilt, it's important to realize that we only feel guilty about things we take responsibility for. And we only feel guilty if there's some sort of standard or value violation. So inquire into, for me to feel guilty in this particular context, what value or standard have I not living up to? And by what criteria? In this way, sometimes guilt can be a useful feeling because it can alert you to, I didn't treat my son well yesterday, or the way I raised my voice at my mother, or whatever it might be. And then you might apologize or try to make amends, and the guilt goes away. But a lot of people have internalized values and standards that are very inhumane, and where only a solid dose of hypocrisy can make life bearable. You know, so if some people may have internalized values where, even having lust or sexual fantasies is tearing them apart with guilt because they've internalized this ideology that somehow says that that's sinful. Some people practically have guilt for just being alive and for breathing, or due to having white skin color because they've internalized some sort of insane woke ideology, or they have guilt due to someone else feeling bad, and they have this perception that they must never disappoint anyone, or that they must live up to other people's standards of them. So, some values that people have internalized, again, require a solid dose of hypocrisy for life to be even minimally bearable. And these might be destructive ideas, and ideas that it's impossible to fully live up to. It's not useful. So in helping this person, it might be very important to help them to really flush out what these values and standards are, and to help people to realize that they can actually self-define these standards. Take a look at them, take a step back, evaluate, to what extent this is useful and functional in my life, and to discover more of that, inner capacity to author one's own experience. Guilt, sometimes you will meet clients who are just stuck in guilt. They've been guilty for years, and something dramatic may have happened in their life, and they're just stuck with guilt. And when they do this, one thing to really check for is to see that maintaining the guilt very often keeps a positive function for them, because again, you're only guilty for something that you take responsibility for. And for a lot of people, being guilty can maintain this illusion of there's hope, or I can change this, or by blaming myself, things could have been different. So holding on to that often becomes a way of protecting oneself from really realizing that we don't have the sense of agency that we think we have. Like, we don't have that control. We don't have that influence. Life is chaotic and unjust, and lives itself without us having that much to say about it. So it very often seems as if being guilty for many people seems preferable because it maintains that illusion of agency and authorship and hope that I could have done something different, things could have been different. And when it comes to things where that's not the case, it can be terrible for people to really acknowledge that I couldn't have done anything different, and life actually couldn't have been different. It takes away a hope. It takes away some agency, but there's a lot of freedom to be realized in having the realization that things really could not have been any different. There's nothing different than that I could have done. Guilt can also be, people who struggle with guilt over time, it can be a very selfish and egotistical emotion of sorts that seems very altruistic and concerned about others. Because if I wallow in guilt, it's pretty much all about me. It can be a way for me to be significant, and for me to be the center point in everything. And yeah, that might be that might also be important to look at as well. Psychologists talk about these fallacies. One of them being the just world fallacy. And this one is tempting often, especially if life has gone quite well, to say that, look, if my life is going pretty well, that's the result of a just world. It's my hard work. It's what I have done. It's what I have brought to the table that makes my life good. And then vice versa, if someone's life is not very good, that's kind of a just world too. But this is a fallacy, and for a lot of people to really acknowledge the kind of randomness and unfairness of life, how some people can get an extremely raw deal and accidents can happen, and shit happens. People get wrongly convicted for crimes they haven't done. Like for a lot of people, even being willing to look at that is extremely threatening, because it challenges this just world fallacy. It challenges a sense of security where I can trust that my life will go well because I'm doing the right things. And to realize that we can all be extremely vulnerable to the tragedies of life can be a kind of terrifying thing to acknowledge and to look at. But again, there's a lot of freedom to be found in realizing that. And one of the things that often can get in the way is this sense of guilt, because there's an assumption of agency and hope and power in that a lot of people have a lot invested in holding on to. There's also something else. If I'm guilty all the time and it's all about me, I don't have a lot of attention left for other people and what's actually going on. So dropping my guilt, then, if I'm stuck in guilt, may open up to seeing more of what's going on and having to deal with that. And for a lot of people, wallowing in their own guilt may be preferable. What you can do as a good helper or a coach or a therapist is to at least to help people to understand these mechanisms, to see them, and by seeing the mechanisms more, to have more choice about it, by realizing, okay, this is what I'm actually doing, and this is what function having excessive long-term guilt may be serving in my life. But again, everyone has the right to feel whatever they feel, and that's pretty much how it goes. So I hope this was useful. If you have any reflections around this, I'd like to hear it. Just post it where you find the video. And if you resonate with my way of working, know that I see clients full-time. And if you would like to book a session to make some changes, you can reach me at provocativehypnosis.com. If you're watching this in 2022, know that I'm doing a seminar titled Painful Illusions, which is about how I work with and how you can work with too people with chronic pain and psychosomatic issues. Guilt is often a very important component in helping people to recover there. So if that's of interest, check out the seminar page on provocativehypnosis.com. It's on November 26th and 27th, online, 2022. Once again, as always, thanks for listening.